Welcome to the Story Fulfilled podcast, where we deep dive into how each character and story in the Bible comes together to fulfill the story of God. I'm Fletcher.
I'm Abby.
And I'm Jay.
And today's story is about the fall.
The fall.
The season. No.
Pumpkin spice.
We've talked. That's right. Yeah, pumpkin spice season. No, the fall of man.
The fall of all of humanity.
Human.
The world. Wow. All right. Well, welcome back.
We're back. It's season 6.
Yeah.
The summertime season.
Summer,
Ready to go?
Summertime.
There's
Okay.
so many summer songs, and that's what you went with.
Well, yeah. That's what I did.
That's the one.
I can only be who I am. I'm sorry.
Oh man.
All right.
Yeah,
it's a brand new
we'd
season.
like you to apologize for who you are, Jay.
Yes.
It is a brand new season of the Story Fulfilled podcast, and we are very glad to have you along to be listening and journeying with us as we continue.
As we deep dive into how each story and character in the Bible come together to fulfill the story of God.
It's like you've said that before. So, as is the case with every new season, we have a new topic. So last season we talked about unlikely people throughout the Bible, and this season's theme is called out, which actually could have a few different meanings.
That's
so
why I think we need to explain that better.
Yeah.
Called out.
So we're going to look at stories in the Bible where people are actually called out for something that they've done. So somebody is calling them out, and that might be God. It might be another person. I don't know. Are we talking about a donkey calling anyone out?
Maybe.
There's that happens as well. But either way, in each of these stories, we're going to explore kind of the dichotomy of judgment and forgiveness and justice and mercy. And hopefully the end is that we're going to learn how to apply them in a godly way in our lives.
Yeah, awesome.
And of course, we have a question to kick things off. And because we're talking about the fall of humanity, Adam and Eve got themselves into trouble. And there was no hiding. No hiding. Even though they tried. And so the question today is, tell us about a time when there was just nowhere to hide from something that you had done.
All right, I guess I can start. We kind of talked about the idea of like a sibling story as well, so I'll combine the two together. So my brother, I have a younger brother. His name's Braden, and boy, did I do some stuff to him.
Just a bit.
That's it. If you're listening, Braden. Well, he was my best man at my wedding, and he gave a speech, and all he's going, well, I think we had some good times, but I don't remember. I remember he hit me with a pepperoni.
There you go.
One time.
You hit him with a pepperoni.
Yeah,
that was part of his speech.
That was part of his speech.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It was
So I remember
fun.
this one time we're at my grandma's house, and we were wrestling. I started the wrestling, and he was not voluntarily involved in the wrestling.
Right.
No. And I dropped him like on his shoulder and like hurt his shoulder, and I'm like, oh no. Nice. And I did, of course, the usual brother shh, please, like you can punch me back. I'm sorry.
Stop crying. Here's a candy.
But he was actually hurt. I'm like, oh crap. And so I was caught. There was no getting away from that. And I tried to hide it. I tried to hush him up. Punch me, hit me back, but there was no success in that. It's worked in the past. This time it did not work. So if you're ever fighting with your brother, make sure to hurt them enough. Sorry, don't hurt them enough so they're going to go tell your parents.
That's
Just have a consensual wrestling match.
Consensual.
Wow.
That's all it takes.
That's something.
That's good. That's good. All right. One time, my cousin stayed with our family during the month of August often. He worked at the CNE, and we were just closer to the subway line where he would have to take to get down. We had 24-hour buses and everything. And so he stayed at our place. And one night, and I loved having him around. And so one night I stayed up and he came home late, and we got a really dumb idea to, I lived on the 4th floor of our apartment building. And we got the idea to like just throw things off the balcony. Oh. And there was this guy going by on his bicycle. And so we threw ice cubes at him.
Oh my gosh.
And so we threw a few, and he'd come back and he'd look up, and then we'd hide, and then he'd go, and then we'd throw another one.
How many times was this guy crossing the street?
Well, Well, because we threw ice cubes, he's like, he wanted to know what was going on, right? Like, he's like, he wanted to get to the bottom of this. And so this went on for a bit, and then heard my mother come downstairs, because my mother was a smoker, and so she would go out to the balcony to smoke. And so my cousin and I, we went back inside because we're like, we don't want to be out there. And then my mom goes out and she's standing on the balcony, and all she hears is, "What's your problem, you jerk?"
That's funny.
And she's like, "Excuse me?" And this guy yells like, "What's your problem? Why are you throwing ice cubes at me?" And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I think I know who might. And so my cousin and I, and he got the brunt. He was older than me, so he got kind of the, like, I expect more out of you. You should be more mature.
But it was your mom that caught you.
It was my mom that caught us. And there was no hiding. We just had to come clean, throwing ice cubes at the guy on the bike.
Wow. That's a story.
Don't do that.
Next time, do it from your neighbor's balcony.
Yeah, that's smarter.
That's right.
Don't
There you go.
How do you get to their balcony at midnight?
What floor were you on when you did this exactly?
The 4th floor. We also used to tie peanuts to fishing rods and catch squirrels from the 4th floor. Sometimes you get them up a floor or two, and then they let go.
jump.
And if you watch
That's
Mark Rober,
funny.
you'll learn that squirrels always land on their feet, so we did no harm. It was fun.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, they have the choice to hang on too
That's
or not.
right.
It's not like
And then
they
you
have
get
to.
attacked by a squirrel.
They just wanted that peanut.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
That one's funny. The ice cube one, I can understand why the guy is mad.
Yeah, me too.
Squirrels can't be
I
mad
would
at
have
you.
acted just like he did. But
There you go.
Oh, the mischief, Jay.
yes.
Yeah, I don't have a story.
Abby,
Nothing.
I have nothing.
Abby
I
has
can't
never
think of
done anything mischievous.
you had
no,
to own up
I
to
definitely have. I just nothing that's memorable. Nothing is coming to
We'll
mind.
call your family.
Okay, you do that.
And next week we'll have an no, probably not.
If
but-
you can catch Abby in something that she
Yeah.
has
No,
to own
I-
up to, we will give you a button and a
I
sticker.
know.
A
Listen,
story fulfilled
I
swag.
got in
and a
trouble.
featuring, we'll tell you about it.
We'll feature
I got
you.
in trouble with my parents. I know I did. But I did not like getting in trouble at school or at church or anything like that. So I don't know. I just don't remember anything specific where it's like, oh, this is a great story.
See, I didn't like getting in trouble at school or anywhere else either, but I had to take it out somewhere, so I did it at home.
I didn't like getting in trouble, but trouble really liked following
Finding
me.
you, exactly.
Yeah.
There you go.
Maybe it's a guy thing. We like
All
getting in
right.
trouble.
Well,
Who
either
knows?
way, we do encourage you to read the stories for yourselves to get the whole picture of what is going on. And today's story takes place in the book of Genesis.
The book of Genesis, right? And Genesis means
Beginnings. In the beginning.
So we were at the beginning today in our very story. So we're talking about the fall, and we normally take a look at the history, but as you know, not much has taken place
much.
before this story. So we're at the dawn of time, the dawn of humanity. Adam and Eve were created. We're in Genesis 2, 3, and 4 today. And so we can look back at the two previous chapters to get an idea of what's going on. In Genesis, we get the account of creation. In Genesis 1, we get the account of creation. In Genesis 2, we get kind of the story of the human origins,
Right.
what's going on there. And then before today's story starts, Adam and Eve are placed in the garden, and they're naked and they're unashamed, and they're given the duty of tending and working the garden.
Yeah.
Also, because this is the dawn of time, we don't really have the same geography now as we did way back when. So we kind of have guesses about where Eden could be. We kind of wonder if it was like Egypt, Canaan, even some people would say Iran. But all that we really know is that there is a river in Eden that's split into 4 rivers. So Pishon, which flowed around Havilah, Gihon, which flowed around Cush, Tigris, which flows east of Assyria and the Euphrates. And the Tigris and the Euphrates are the only 2 rivers that we actually hear about today, and they are in modern-day Iraq. So again, we're making a little bit of guesses. There are theories of where the other rivers are located and where Eden was, such as the Gihon being in India and the Pishon being the Nile. But as far as the text concerns, that's really all that we have right now.
Right. So all that to say, if your theology depends on the location of Eden, there's going to be some concerns. Like it's not foundational. We don't need to know that in order to have.
But
a
everybody
relationship
likes
with Jesus.
speculations.
Sure.
So
And sometimes some really interesting theories come out about some things like this, and
absolutely.
yeah, it's really fun.
So look into it. But for the text's sake, we won't make any strong claims about the location of the
No.
Garden of Eden.
Nope.
But our story does take place there. So that's what that's our setting for today's story. So of course it starts in the garden, and Adam and Eve have been put there to work the garden. That's their job. Mm-hmm. And so every good plant and good fruit has been put there to eat, and they've been given one rule from God: don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? Because on the day you eat it, surely you will die. That's God's command. He can do anything else. Don't eat of the fruit. That's one rule.
That's it.
So God creates the woman out of Adam's side, and we have a whole episode on Eve from season 2. Go listen to it. So you can
OG helper.
The OG helper. That's right, Eve. And so we hear of a story of a serpent appearing to Eve, and he says, well, did God really say that you shall not eat of the tree of the garden? Mm-hmm. And Eve's like, well, no, that's not what he said. He actually said that we're allowed to eat of any tree, but God said, you're not going to touch the tree that is in the middle of the garden or eat any fruit of it lest you die.
Right.
And so
she adds or even touch it, because that actually God didn't say don't touch it.
Eve has a little bit of a misunderstanding of what's going on with the commandment from God, and that's what she relays to the serpent. And so the serpent comes back at her and says, well, no, you're not surely going to die. God knows that if you eat it, your eyes will be opened and you will become like God, knowing good and evil. Mm-hmm. And so the woman looked at the tree and she sees that it's good fruit to eat. And she has this desire to be wise, like God. And so she takes it and she gives it to her husband and she eats it and he eats it. And it says their eyes are opened and they realized they were naked. And so they covered themselves up with fig leaves. Yeah. Cover themselves with fig leaves. Yep. We'll see later. So God comes looking for them when they hide because they were naked, right? And God asks them, who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree? Mm-hmm. Adam immediately tries to blame his wife. He goes, oh, the woman brought it to me and, so I ate it. And then God asks Eve what happened. She tells him about the serpent and the whole situation there. And then God goes to the serpent and puts a curse on him. You know, we have an episode on Satan about the serpent. Go watch that to hear the full curse. But then he turns to Adam and to Eve, and he says to the woman, first of all, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. And to Adam he says, because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat from it all the days of your life. I will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food, until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. Mm-hmm. And so God now replaces their leaves, and he takes animal skins, and he clothes them and says, this is the man. He has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Right. And so God is talking to himself, and he says, what if they take fruit from the tree of life and live forever? And so they decide to put a angel guarding the garden, and they kick them out into the rest of the world, out of the garden, and they have to now work for their food. Yeah. You're going to toil, right? If you listen back to the curse. Yep. So Adam and Eve start to have kids. They start to reproduce, right? That was one of the commandments, is be fruitful and multiply. That was their original commandment. Tend the garden, be fruitful and multiply. And so now they're starting to multiply. They have many children, but their first two are named Cain and Abel. And so when they grew up, Cain became a farmer and Abel became a shepherd. Eventually we see that Cain and Abel bring sacrifices to God. Right. And so Cain brought fruit from the ground, and Abel brought a fatty portion of his firstborn of his flock. And it says that when God looked at the both sacrifices, he favored Abel's and despised Cain's. Mm-hmm. So he paid no attention at all to Cain's sacrifice. Yeah. And so we're not actually sure what made Abel's sacrifice better. We're not 100% sure. There's certain, opinions about it. But a common thought is that Abel gave his best. He gave of the fatty portion of his firstborn, whereas it just says Cain gave of his fruits. He just brought some fruits.
Of what he had.
Right. So Abel giving his sacrifice in faith, whereas Cain is just giving a sacrifice for the sake of it. So
could also be that he saw his brother giving sacrifice and he thought,
maybe I should do
that. I should do the same.
Right. So just in imitation. Yeah. Instead of honestly desiring to give thanks to God. So Cain knows that God isn't happy with the sacrifice, and he gets angry. And it says his face lowers or his mood lowers. And God speaks to Cain, why are you so angry? Why are you sad? Surely if you do good, your mood will improve. But if you do not do good, sin is perched at the door, desiring to have you, but you must master it. Yeah. So Cain is given this choice immediately. Listen, there's no reason to be sad. If you do good, that's what pleases God. But if you're ready to sin and you're ready to resent, sin is ready to take you.
Yeah.
It's ready for you. And so later on, Cain is out in the field with his brother Abel, and he gives into that sin that is perching at the door, and he kills his brother.
Right.
And God comes back to Cain and says, "Where's your brother?" And Cain's like, I don't know. Where am I? Am I supposed to keep him? Am I his babysitter? No. And so God says, "Nice try, Cain. I can hear your brother's blood calling from the ground." Yeah. And he puts a curse again on Cain, and he says, "You are cursed from the ground. The ground will no longer grow for you. You will wander the earth." And so what Cain, right? Abel was a shepherd, so he was growing animals to eat. Cain was a farmer, and so telling a farmer the earth will no longer grow for you is the ultimate curse, right?
Thing, yeah.
Any food that you're going to grow, it's not going to grow. Any work that you're going to do, it's not going to be fruitful. So even more stacked on top of the curse that Adam and his family already got, the earth, you'll have to toil for it. Now it won't even succumb to growth.
And added in there is that you will wander the earth. And so like part of agriculture is being in one place for a prolonged period of time. And he doesn't even have that now because he's
part of the curse is he was a farmer. He was into agriculture. And now he's basically going to have to gather and hunt for his food instead of being able to stay put and grow food. And so Cain complains, this punishment is too great. Anybody who finds me is going to kill me.
Right. Which
for what he's
he
done.
Just killed his brother.
Yeah, you'd think it's the just punishment, but he's not in that. He's anybody who finds me, it's probably going to be his relatives, right? People that he knows.
Right. Yeah,
he just killed his brother. Anybody who finds me is going to kill me. And so God says, "Okay, I'll put a mark on you, so that anybody who finds you will know that you're not to be killed."
Right.
And so Cain heads east of Eden and settles in the land of Nod with his family, and that's what we hear from Cain in this Genesis story.
Yeah. And both of these instances, both Adam and Cain had an opportunity to come clean. They had an opportunity to just own up to what had happened, and to take ownership of that, and to repent, to say, "God, I screwed up, and I know that I've done wrong." But instead, they double down, and
Adam tries to blame his wife, and Cain.
And in some ways, Adam's actually blaming God, because he says, "The woman who you gave me, she gave me the fruit," and then Eve turns around and blames the serpent, and then the same thing with Cain, in that God asked him directly, "Where's your brother?"
Yeah, I don't know.
Who am I? My brother's keeper. Yeah,
his keeper.
Yeah, but even before that, God even says to him, "Hey, like sin is creeping. If you do what's right, then you'll be well. But sin is creeping at the door, and will take over you if you don't master it." And Cain could then have said, "God, I don't know how to master it. Can you show me? Can you please repent?" And instead, he takes it out on his brother, who had done no wrong. He's mad at God, so he kills his brother, which is insane.
Yeah, the jealousy there, it started overflowing. So it's like, I'm mad at God. Oh, it's my brother's fault that I'm mad at God. And it kind of overflowed onto his brother. And he succumbs to that. Crouching. The imagery is like there's an animal at your door, and he's ready to have your way, ready to
Peter
eat.
Grabs onto later in the New Testament, and he says, "Your adversary, the devil, is prowling around like a lion, waiting to devour its prey." It's important that we understand sin in that
exactly, and we see exactly what happens when Cain succumbs to it. And God's not saying if you do good things are going to happen to you.
No.
He's saying, "Why are you sad, Cain?" Well, this is what happened. And then God says, if you do good, your mood will improve. Doing good is actually what's going to help him.
Yeah.
It's not going to help him be good or be better for the sake of being good, but his demeanor, his face, his mood will improve because you're doing good. But sin is ready to bring you down in every sort of way.
And in this instance, it's not about even doing good deeds. It's about honoring God with your sacrifice and trusting him to be the provider in your life.
All right. So like our theme of the season is, where do we see the forgiveness, and where do we see the justice, and where do we see the mercy, and where do we see the judgment, right? Because those are opposing forces, justice and mercy.
Right. Well, we see, like in the Adam and Eve portion of the story, we see, unfortunately, this is the first killing of an animal, and that becomes the covering of sin. And we see this carried out throughout the rest of the story of the Old Testament, and we see that where there is sin, there a sacrifice is required. And Hebrews talks about the same thing, like where there's sin, their blood is a requirement. But in that is God. I think that's both. Like that's God. There's justice in that there's a payment for that separation, the sin, but it's also His mercy in that that's holding back the punishment of sin, because as He said, they would die, and we see they didn't actually die; they continued to live, but death was now
in the world.
The world, and
well, they did eventually die. That's the thing. I think if Adam and Eve had continued to live and walk with God, the plan wasn't for death for them, right? What we look forward to is everlasting life in relationship with God. And so Adam and Eve had that. They were in right relationship with God, and they lost it. And so you will surely die doesn't mean you're going to die when you touch the fruit. It means you're separated from the life giver Himself. Yeah. And death is now in the world, right?
And then another part of the judgment is we see it in what we refer to as the curse, in that work is now a burden, and it's hard, and there's in that I think we see kind of it continues to unfold, and then in work is burdensome and difficult, and there's injustices around work and around just world systems and greed and all of that stems out of that. And so we see that the world becomes a difficult place to live in. We experience physical pain. So Eve experienced heightened physical pain in childbirth, and it says her desire would be for her husband. And we see imbalances of power and all of this flows from just sin entering the world. And that it serves as a bit of a judgment on humanity that we need to now wrestle with. And that leads us to ask questions like, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do all these things happen? And the answer is because sin is a part of it's a reality in our world. And it's difficult for us to wrestle with, for sure.
I think one of the best answers I've heard for that is we don't live as in an individual world, in a personal world. We pay for we take consequences from other people constantly, right? I pay for the sins of people before me, right? The reason I'm in my spot in life is because of other people. So we can't say, well, I haven't done anything wrong. I don't need innocent people suffer all the time for the sins of others. And so in the same way, we are all paying the same price because of the initial fall. And so we look back and say, this is the reason that all this bad stuff, all this injustice, all this suffering is happening, is because we separated ourselves from God, and we're not individuals in that. I can't say I'm innocent. I don't deserve to suffer. There's a lot of innocence and there's a lot of suffering, and so we're not alone in it. Yeah. But luckily, the dichotomy that Jay said is the opposite. It's God's mercy and God's forgiveness in that, and so that's the other section of the story that we need to take a look at. Yeah,
and we see that with Cain too. Like he's given, even though he has to wander the world, he's still allowed to live. And I think in that he's given the opportunity then to recognize, hey, the next time you do something, you have an opportunity to bring it before God and to repent. And that's and whether he does or not is maybe up for debate, but that's where we find ourselves because we are confronted. It's what we call a conscience. It's what we call conviction. And so sometimes we do things that are wrong, and it's what do we do with that? And we're given every opportunity to bring it before the Lord each and every time, and to say, Lord, I've sinned before you. Like David, who took the wife of another man and had that man killed, and when he's confronted with it, and we're going to get to him, I guess I shouldn't maybe do the spoilers.
You get a little taste of the later in the season.
But he says, I have sinned against God alone. And that's what we need to understand, is that we are responsible for our interaction with God and how we relate to conviction.
Cool. Yeah, I really like looking at like you said, the mercy side of Cain's story. So yes, there was this terrible curse for what he'd done. But he says, God, this is too much for me to bear. And he says, okay, I won't, what you deserve is death. Like if we see, when we look at the story of Noah, right? Murder, the sentence is death. And in the Old Testament law, murder, the sentence, death is capital punishment, essentially, is what murder's punishment is. And he says, okay, you know what? I won't kill you. I will lighten your sentence and say this is what it is, and I will prevent you from being killed. So he gives us that chance, right? And so we've been given the same chance. We sin all the time, and so God doesn't immediately respond with death.
Right.
He responds with patience and giving us a chance.
That's right.
Over and over. So we have that same chance that Cain has to go out and live, and to choose God as opposed to choosing the sin that is crouching and ready to devour.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that leads to our final question. How does this story lead to the fulfilling of the rest of the story of God throughout the Bible?
Yeah. Well, I think it's what you just said, actually, in that we are given that forgiveness and that opportunity to turn to God continually, and He's shown that from the very beginning in the way that He deals with humanity. He's placed His righteous demands before humanity, and Adam and Eve fail in that, and He says, okay, this is the thing, you can't do it without me, so I'm going to do it for you. And that actually becomes the whole story of the Old Testament, that the people of Israel are learning that they can't do it, but He will do it for them. And then through Jesus, we're shown, again, we can't do it, but He will do it. And He invites us to allow Him to do it in us and through us.
That's really the plan of the Bible. When you look from beginning to end, it's God's ultimate plan is slowly restoring the world with the ultimate in Jesus, and then putting forward of His church. And that mission is really of the church, is to bring God's kingdom, right? Your will be done, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. That's the role of the church. And so God's plan is using us and using His Son to bring about His kingdom on the earth. And so that's the restoration aspect. The story's not over with the fall.
That's right.
I think
and that's good.
Say. That's thank goodness, because we've all fallen and blown it as well.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, I guess that concludes the first episode of Season 6.
All right.
All right. Can't wait to see you next week.
Bye for now.
Bye.